What if the most dangerous man in New York saved the one woman who could destroy him? A mafia boss finds a dying cop bleeding out in a rain-soaked alley. He has every reason to walk away. Instead, he makes a choice that will expose the darkest secret in the NYPD and ignite a forbidden love that neither of them will survive unchanged. This is the story that shocked an entire city. Rain hammered the streets of Brooklyn like the city was punishing itself for sins it couldn't name. Luca Moretti stood beneath a broken streetlight, his cigarette burning low, the ember glowing like a dying star in the darkness. He wasn't supposed to be here tonight. This alley held ghosts he'd spent 10 years trying to bury, but fate doesn't take orders from men like Luca. He'd come to collect a debt, routine work, a quick meeting, a reminder of who controlled these streets, maybe a threat if the debtor got brave. Simple, clean, the kind of business that kept his empire running smooth. Then the smell hit him, gunpowder, sharp and recent. His hand moved instinctively to the gun at his waist as he turned toward the sound that followed. A soft, desperate groan that cut through the rain like a prayer no one would answer. She lay crumpled beside the dumpster, her uniform soaked dark with rain and something thicker. Her badge caught the fractured light, glinting weakly. NYPD. Luca froze. He'd seen cops die before. Hell, he'd ordered some of those deaths himself. But this one? Something about the way her hand trembled toward her empty holster, still trying to fight even as her body gave out, made him hesitate. Before we dive in, if you love dark mafia romances, dangerous men, and plot twists that make you gasp out loud, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. YouTube only feeds you what you engage with, so if you want your nights filled with stories that keep you awake until sunrise, you know what to do. Subscribe, comment your location, and buckle up, because what's coming next is going to consume you. He should have kept walking. He should have let Brooklyn claim another casualty. But then she moved. Her head turned slightly, and through the rain and blood, her eyes found his. Dark eyes, defiant eyes, eyes that refused to beg even as death closed in. And for one brutal second, Luca saw someone else in that alley. His sister, 10 years ago, same badge, same blood, different ending he couldn't rewrite. He cursed under his breath, dropped his cigarette into a puddle, and tore off his jacket. "Don't you dare," he muttered, pressing the fabric hard against the wound in her side. "Don't close your eyes." Her lips parted, blood stained her teeth. "You," she gasped, recognition flickering behind the pain. "You're Moretti." His jaw tightened. Even bleeding out, she knew him. "You talk too much," he said, slipping his arm beneath her shoulders. Her body was lighter than it should have been, like the city had already started to hollow her out. "Save it for later." He lifted her, and she groaned. A sound caught between agony and protest. Her blood soaked through his shirt, warm against his skin, a reminder that this decision would cost him something he couldn't calculate yet. Every step toward his car was an argument with himself. "She's a cop. She'd arrest you the second she could stand. The last time you tried to save someone, you buried her." But his feet kept moving. His arms kept holding her, and when he laid her across the back seat and heard her shallow breathing, he made the choice that would unravel everything. He got in, he started the engine, and he drove away from the alley where fate had decided to give him a second chance, or a second curse. The safe house smelled like gun oil, old cigarettes, and disinfectant that never quite masked the scent of violence. It was a forgotten warehouse on the edge of Red Hook, where Luca's men came to disappear when the city got too hot. Marco was already there, leaning against the wall with a pistol on the table and suspicion in his eyes. When Luca kicked open the door with an unconscious cop in his arms, Marco's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something close to fury. "Boss," he said slowly, like he was talking to a man who'd lost his mind. "Tell me this ain't what it looks like." Luca laid Ava on the metal cot in the corner, ignoring the question. Her face was pale, lips turning the color of ash. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat. Her pulse was weak, but present. "It's exactly what it looks like," Luca said, straightening. He grabbed a towel from the table and wiped the blood from his hands. Marco stared at him. "You brought a cop here, to our place." He gestured at the walls, at the crates of unmarked goods, at the maps of territories pinned beside bulletproof vests. "What's the plan? Adopt her?" Luca lit another cigarette, his movements deliberate, controlled. She saw something she wasn't supposed to. "Someone wanted her dead fast. That makes her useful." "Useful?" Marco's laugh was sharp and bitter. "She's a bullet with a badge, Luca. The second she wakes up, she'll put us all in cuffs. Or worse, she'll bring the whole damn precinct down on us." Luca exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. "Then we make sure she doesn't wake up with the wrong idea." Marco shook his head. "You're letting guilt talk again. This is about your sister, isn't it?" The room went cold. Luca's eyes snapped to Marco's, hard as stone. "Don't." But Marco didn't flinch. "Sophia died because she trusted the wrong people. Saving this one won't bring her back." "I know that," Luca said quietly. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that came before violence. Marco backed off, hands raised. "Fine, but when this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." He left. The door slamming behind him. Luca stood alone with the dying woman and the ghost of his sister. He moved to the cot, crouched beside it, and studied Ava's face. Even unconscious, she looked like she was fighting something. Her brow furrowed, her fingers twitched. "Stay with me," he whispered again, though she couldn't hear him. But maybe he wasn't talking to her. Maybe he was talking to the part of himself he thought had died 10 years ago in another alley, holding another cop who didn't make it home. Ava's breathing hitched, her eyelids fluttered, and Luca realized something terrifying. He wasn't sure if he'd saved her or condemned them both. Pain woke her first, sharp, relentless pain that radiated from her side and spread through her ribs like fire. Ava gasped, her eyes snapping open to unfamiliar darkness, lit only by the dull hum of a generator and a single overhead bulb swaying gently. Where was she? The last thing she remembered was the alley, the rain, the call for backup that never came, and then the shot, from behind. Her breath caught as the memory slammed into her. She tried to sit up, and the pain screamed louder. Her hand flew to her side and found bandages, rough stitches, the sting of something recently sewn together. "Careful." The voice came from the shadows. Ava's head whipped toward the sound, and her body tensed despite the agony. A man sat in a chair 10 feet away, half hidden in darkness, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. Her vision sharpened, and then she recognized him. "No." "Moretti," she whispered, the name tasting like poison. Luca Moretti, Brooklyn's most wanted. The man she'd been chasing for 6 months, the man whose files she'd memorized, whose known associates she'd tracked, whose empire she'd sworn to dismantle, and now she was lying on a cot in what could only be his safe house. Terror and rage collided in her chest. "Why am I still alive?" she rasped, her throat dry and raw. Luca leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his face emerging from the shadows. He looked younger than his reputation suggested. Mid-30s. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that held something she didn't expect. Exhaustion. "You tell me, detective," he said calmly. "Who shot you?" Her pulse spiked. She said nothing. He studied her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or destroy. "I could have left you bleeding in that alley, but I didn't. So either you're incredibly lucky, or you've got information someone's willing to kill for." Ava's mind raced. She couldn't tell him the truth. She didn't even fully understand it herself. All she knew was that the shot came from behind her, that her partner's voice had said, "I'm sorry," that the NYPD might have just tried to execute her. "I'm not telling you anything," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Luca smirked faintly. "You don't have to. Your silence already told me what I need to know." "And what's that?" "That you're more afraid of whoever shot you than you are of me." The words hit harder than she wanted to admit. She looked away, jaw tight, fists clenched despite the pain. "What's your name?" he asked, softer now. She hesitated. Giving him her name felt like handing over a weapon, but he probably already knew. Men like him always did. "Detective Ava Reyes," she said coldly. "Pretty name." Luca said. "For someone bleeding on my floor." Her eyes snapped back to his. "Why save me?" He didn't answer right away. He took a slow drag from his cigarette, exhaled smoke toward the ceiling, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried something that sounded almost like honesty. "Maybe I was bored." She studied his face, the scar near his temple, the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands didn't shake even though he'd just dragged a dying cop into his den. Nothing about him said bored. "You're lying," she said. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Maybe. But you're alive. So does it matter?" Ava didn't answer, because the truth was, she didn't know. 3 days passed in a strange, suffocating rhythm. Ava's wound began to close, the fever broke, and the sharpness of the pain dulled into a constant, manageable ache. But the tension in the safe house never eased. It thickened with every silence, every glance, every moment Luca Moretti did something that contradicted everything she thought she knew about men like him. He brought her food, soup, bread, water, not mercy, just sustenance. He changed her bandages without speaking, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone who'd probably killed more people than she'd arrested. He didn't touch her beyond what was necessary, didn't threaten her, didn't demand answers, and that scared her more than anything. On the third night, Ava sat on the edge of the cot, her legs finally strong enough to hold her weight for more than a few seconds. She watched him across the room, leaning against the table, scrolling through his phone with one hand, a cigarette in the other. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. He glanced up. "And what did you expect?" "A monster." Luca's expression didn't change. He set his phone down, crossed the room, and crouched in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. "Maybe I still am," he said, his voice low. "You just haven't seen that part yet." "Then why haven't you killed me?" "Because you're worth more alive." The words should have been cold, clinical, but the way he said them, like he was trying to convince himself as much as her, made them feel dangerously personal. Ava's breath hitched. "You think I'll help you?" "I think," Luca said, "you don't have anywhere else to go." She hated that he was right. She hated the way his gaze lingered on her face, like he was searching for something he'd lost. She hated the way her pulse quickened when he stood, his hand brushing her shoulder as he moved past her. "Get some rest," he said. "You're still weak." "I don't need you to tell me what I am," she shot back, her voice sharp with defiance. He paused at the door, glanced over his shoulder, and the faintest hint of a smile touched his lips. "No," he said. "You don't." And then he was gone. Ava sat in the dim light, her heart pounding for reasons she refused to name. Luca didn't sleep that night. He stood on the roof of the warehouse, the city sprawled out before him like a graveyard of broken promises. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened, reflecting neon and headlights and the ghosts of everyone he'd failed. His sister's face haunted him most. Sophia, 25 years old, bright, stubborn. A rookie cop who believed she could change the system from the inside. She'd been so sure that justice existed somewhere beneath the corruption, that good men still wore badges. Luca had warned her, begged her to walk away, told her the NYPD was rotten at its core. She didn't listen. And then one night, she called him, frantic, scared, said she'd found something, files, recordings, proof that her captain was on a rival family's payroll. "I'm going to expose them," she'd said. "I'm going to make this right." Luca had driven across the city to stop her, but he was too late. He found her in an alley, shot twice in the back, her badge still pinned to her chest. The official report called it gang violence, a tragic casualty of Brooklyn's war on crime. But Luca knew the truth. The NYPD had killed her, not for being a cop, for being a good one. He'd buried his faith that day, buried his heart, vowed never to trust another badge, never to believe in justice, never to let guilt weaken him again. And yet here he was, saving another cop. protecting another woman who wore the same uniform that had gotten his sister murdered. He exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the edge of the roof. Why? Because Ava reminded him of Sophia, not in looks, but in the way she refused to die quietly, in the way her eyes still burned with something that hadn't been extinguished yet. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he just couldn't stand the thought of failing again. His phone buzzed. Marco's name lit up the screen. "We've got a problem. Doyle's asking questions." He knows she's not dead. Luca's jaw tightened. Captain Doyle, the name Ava had whispered in her sleep, laced with fear and betrayal. The man who'd tried to kill her. Luca typed back, "Let him ask. He won't find her." He pocketed the phone and turned back toward the stairwell. Ava was still awake when he returned. She sat on the cot, her knees drawn to her chest, her eyes distant. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "You ever lose someone you couldn't save?" Luca's chest tightened. "Yeah." "Then you know why I can't sleep." He moved to the chair, sat down, and for the first time since he'd carried her out of that alley, he told her the truth. "My sister was a cop," he said quietly. "She found out her captain was dirty. She tried to expose him. They killed her for it." Ava's head turned slowly. Her eyes met his. "That's why you saved me," she whispered. "Maybe," Luca admitted, "or maybe I just couldn't watch another cop die in an alley." The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared grief and unspoken understanding, and for the first time Ava saw him not as a monster, but as a man who carried ghosts too. Morning light crept through the cracks in the warehouse walls, pale and unforgiving. Ava tried to stand on her own for the first time without help. Her legs trembled, her sides screamed in protest, but she forced herself upright, one hand braced against the wall, her jaw set with determination. Luca watched from across the room, silent. She took one step, then another. Her breath came in short gasps, sweat beading on her forehead. On the third step, her knee buckled. He was there before she hit the ground. His arm caught her waist, pulling her against him, steadying her. "Easy." "I don't need—" She started, but her voice faltered. "Yes," he said quietly. "You do." For a moment, neither of them moved. Her hands gripped his shoulders, his arm stayed around her waist. Their faces were inches apart, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because," Luca said, his voice rough, "if you die now, it'll be for nothing, and I've buried enough people who died for nothing." Something shifted in her chest, something dangerous and unwanted and impossible to ignore. She pulled back, breaking the contact, her walls slamming back into place. "I'm not your redemption project." "I know," he said, "but you're the only person in this city who might understand what it's like to be betrayed by the people you trusted most." Ava's throat tightened. She looked away. "The NYPD declared you dead," Luca continued. "Captain Doyle filed the report himself. As far as the city's concerned, you didn't survive that alley." Her hands clenched into fists. "Then I'm a ghost." "No," Luca said, his gaze unwavering. "You're alive. And as long as you're under my roof, you stay that way." The weight of those words settled over her like armor and chains. She was trapped, dependent, bound to the one man she should have been arresting. But she was alive. And for the first time since she'd woken up in this warehouse, Ava realized something terrifying. She trusted him, not because he was good, not because he was innocent, but because he was the only person in the world who had a reason to keep her breathing. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll stay alive." Luca's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good, because the city's about to get a lot more dangerous." And as the morning light stretched across the floor, two people who should have been enemies made an unspoken pact. Survival. Together. No matter the cost. Living in a mafia safe house felt like being a ghost trapped in purgatory. Ava had survived the bullet. She'd survived the fever, But surviving Luca Moretti's world was something else entirely. The warehouse had rules. Unspoken at first, then made brutally clear. Don't go near the windows. Don't answer the door. Don't ask questions about the men who came and went at odd hours, their voices low, their eyes hard. And above all, don't try to leave. By day 7, Ava's frustration had turned into rage. She stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, watching Luca check the locks on the steel door for the 3rd time that morning. He moved with the precision of a man who'd learned paranoia wasn't a weakness, it was survival. "You're keeping me prisoner," she said flatly. Luca didn't look up. "I'm keeping you alive." Same thing. Now he turned, his dark eyes meeting hers with something between patience and warning. "No, it's not. A prisoner has no choice. You chose to stay the moment you didn't try to run." "Maybe I was too weak to run." "You're not weak anymore." He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them like a storm-building pressure. "So if you want to walk out that door, go ahead. But the second you step outside, you're a target. Your face is known, your name is whispered, and Captain Doyle? He's got people watching every hospital, every precinct, every safe place you used to know." Ava's jaw tightened. "You don't know that. I do." Luca pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen, and held it up. It was a photo. Grainy surveillance footage from outside a Brooklyn bodega. 2 men in plain clothes, faces she recognized from the precinct, weapons concealed beneath jackets, eyes scanning the streets. "They've been looking for you," Luca said. "Marco's contacts confirmed it. Doyle told them you survived. He wants you found before you can talk." Her stomach twisted. She wanted to call him a liar, but the evidence was right there, cold and undeniable. "So what?" she snapped. "I just stay here forever? Live under your rules? Become part of your world?" "No," Luca said, his voice softer now. "You stay here until we figure out who wants you dead and why. Then you get your life back." "And you expect me to believe you'll just let me walk away?" His gaze held hers, unflinching. "I expect you to stay alive long enough to make that choice." Silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Ava hated how reasonable he sounded, hated how his protection felt like both a cage and a lifeline. "I'm not one of your soldiers," she said quietly. "I know." Luca slipped the phone back into his pocket. "But while you're under this roof, you follow my rules. Not because I want to control you, because the moment you don't, you die. And I didn't pull you out of that alley just to bury you a week later." The words landed like a vow. Ava turned away, fists clenched, throat tight with frustration and something she refused to name. "Fine," she muttered. "Your rules. For now." Luca didn't respond, but as he walked past her, she caught the faintest ghost of relief in his expression. And she realized something unsettling. He wasn't just protecting her. He was protecting himself from losing her. Luca didn't sleep much, but that night, he didn't sleep at all. He sat at the metal table in the corner of the warehouse, surrounded by files, photos, and notes scrawled in his sharp handwriting. Marco had delivered the intel earlier, a stack of documents pulled from contacts inside the NYPD, informants who owed favors, and hackers who knew how to disappear digital trails. Everything pointed to one name, Captain Raymond Doyle. Luca studied the man's file. 15 years on the force, decorated, respected, a rising star in Brooklyn's 7th precinct. On paper, he was a hero. But Luca knew better than to trust paper. He cross-referenced Doyle's financial records, offshore accounts, cash deposits that didn't match his salary, real estate purchases that screamed money laundering. The man was dirty, not just dirty, filthy, and Ava had gotten too close. Luca's jaw tightened as he pieced it together. She'd been investigating something big enough that Doyle couldn't risk her finding it. So he'd sent her into that alley, alone, no backup, a clean execution disguised as a gang hit. Except Ava survived. And now Doyle had a problem. Luca's phone buzzed. Marco's name flashed across the screen. He answered without greeting. "Talk." "We've got movement," Marco said, his voice tense. 2 of Doyle's guys were spotted near Red Hook. They're asking questions. showing her photo around. Luca's blood ran cold. How close? 6 blocks, maybe less. Pull everyone back. I don't want them sniffing around the warehouse. Already done. But boss? They're not gonna stop looking. I know. Luca ended the call and stood, his mind racing. Across the room, Ava stirred on the cot, her eyes opening slowly. She looked at him, her expression still clouded with sleep. What's wrong? She asked, sitting up. Luca hesitated. Telling her the truth meant confirming what she probably already suspected. Not telling her meant keeping her in the dark. And that was a different kind of danger. He crossed the room, crouched beside the cot, and met her gaze. Your partner, he said quietly. The one who was with you that night. What's his name? Ava's face went pale. Why? Because I need to know who tried to kill you. Her breath hitched. Captain Doyle, she whispered. He was my superior. He sent me into that alley, alone. Luca nodded slowly. He's dirty. And he's looking for you. Ava's hands trembled. How do you know? Because, Luca said, his voice hard, men like him always tie up loose ends, and right now, detective, you're the biggest loose end he's got. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suffocating intimacy. Ava couldn't leave, couldn't call for help, couldn't do anything but exist in the orbit of a man she was supposed to hate. But Luca made it impossible to hate him. He brought her food, not scraps, but real meals. Pasta, bread, coffee that didn't taste like dirt. He didn't ask if she was hungry. He just placed the plate beside her and walked away. At night, when she woke screaming from nightmares of the alley, of Doyle's voice saying, "I'm sorry," before pulling the trigger, Luca was always there, sitting in the chair, watching, silent. You don't have to stay, she said once, her voice shaking. I know, he replied, but I will anyway. And he did. One night she found him on the roof, leaning against the railing, cigarette smoke curling into the dark. She climbed the stairs, her wound still aching but manageable now, and stood beside him. Why do you do this? She asked. Do what? Act like you care. Luca didn't answer right away. He took a long drag, exhaled slowly, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. Because no one else will. Ava looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, she saw past the reputation, past the violence, past the empire. She saw a man who'd been broken by the same system that had broken her. You're not what they say you are, she said softly. Luca's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Don't mistake kindness for weakness, detective. I've done things that would make you run. Maybe, Ava admitted, but you also saved my life. That counts for something. He turned to face her fully, his eyes searching hers. Does it? Yeah, she whispered. It does. And in that moment, standing on the roof beneath a sky heavy with stars and secrets, something shifted between them, something that felt dangerously close to trust. They sat across from each other in the dim warehouse, the space between them charged with unspoken tension. Luca had poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Ava hadn't touched hers. Tell me what you were investigating, he said. Ava's fingers tightened around the glass. Why? Because if I'm going to keep you alive, I need to know what you found. She looked away. It doesn't matter. Whatever I had, it's gone now. Doyle wouldn't be hunting you this hard if it was gone. Ava's jaw clenched. He was right. She hated that he was right. I found payments, she said finally, cash moving through offshore accounts, tied to Doyle, tied to half the precinct. Luca leaned forward. Who else knows? No one. I was going to take it to internal affairs, but Doyle found out first. How? I don't know. Her voice cracked. I trusted him. He was my mentor, my captain. I thought he was one of the good ones. Luca's expression darkened. There are no good ones. Not in that system. You're wrong, Ava said, her voice fierce. There are good cops, people who actually give a damn. And where are they now? Luca asked coldly. Did any of them come looking for you? Did anyone question your death? Ava flinched, because the answer was no. Silence fell between them, heavy and bitter. I'm sorry, Luca said quietly, but the sooner you accept that the badge doesn't make you a hero, the sooner you'll survive this. Ava looked at him, tears burning behind her eyes. Then what does? Luca's gaze softened. Choosing who you fight for, not what uniform you wear. And for the first time since she'd woken up in his safe house, Ava wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was right. The ambush came at 2 a.m. Ava woke to the sound of shattering glass and Luca's voice cutting through the dark. Move, now. She didn't ask questions. She rolled off the cot, grabbed the jacket he'd left her, and followed him toward the back exit. Gunfire erupted outside. 3 shots, then 4. Who? Doyle's men, Luca said, his gun already drawn. Stay behind me. They moved through the warehouse like shadows, Luca's body a shield between her and the danger closing in. He pushed her into a storage closet, barely big enough for 2 people, and locked the door behind them. Darkness swallowed them whole. Ava's breath came fast and shallow, her heart hammering against her ribs. Luca pressed against her, one hand braced on the wall beside her head, the other still gripping his gun. Don't move, he whispered. Don't make a sound. She nodded, her body trembling. Outside, voices echoed, boots on concrete, orders shouted. They were searching the warehouse room by room. Luca's jaw tightened, his body tensed, ready to fight. But he didn't move, didn't leave her. Seconds stretched into minutes. Ava became hyper-aware of everything, the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the faint scent of cigarettes and gun oil. His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the pulse in his throat, the tension in his shoulders. They'll find us, she whispered. No, Luca said, his voice low and certain. They won't. How do you know? Because I won't let them. The conviction in his voice made her chest ache. The footsteps grew closer, stopped outside the door. Ava held her breath. Luca's free hand moved to her waist, steadying her, grounding her, and then silence. The footsteps moved on. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Finally, Luca exhaled. They're gone. But he didn't pull away. Neither did she. Their eyes met in the darkness, and something unspoken passed between them, something raw and dangerous and impossible to ignore. Ava's breath hitched. Luca's gaze dropped to her lips. For one heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. We need to move, he said, his voice rough. Now. But as they left the closet and disappeared into the night, Ava knew one thing for certain. The line between enemy and ally had just blurred beyond recognition. They made it back to a secondary safe house by dawn. This one was smaller, colder, a forgotten apartment above a closed butcher shop in Sunset Park. Ava sat on the edge of a worn couch, her hands still shaking from the ambush. Luca stood by the window, watching the street below, his gun resting on the sill. The door slammed open. Marco stormed in, his face twisted with fury. He didn't even look at Luca. His eyes went straight to Ava. This is your fault, he snarled, crossing the room in 3 strides. You brought the heat down on us. Doyle's men nearly found the warehouse because of you. Ava stood, her jaw set. I didn't ask to be saved. Then maybe we should have left you to bleed out, Marco spat, stepping closer. Luca moved faster than either of them could react. One moment, Marco was advancing on Ava. The next, Luca had him slammed against the wall, forearm pressed to his throat, gun leveled at his temple. Say that again, Luca said quietly. Too quietly. Marco's eyes went wide. Boss, You didn't what? Luca's voice was ice. Threaten the woman under my protection? Disrespect my decision? Choose which one you want to apologize for. Luca, choose. Marco swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Luca held him there for another heartbeat, then released him. Marco stumbled back, gasping, his hand going to his throat. "Get out," Luca said, "and don't come back until you remember who's in charge." Marco left without another word, the door slamming behind him. Silence filled the room. Ava stared at Luca, her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Luca turned to her, his eyes still hard. "Yes, I did." "Why?" He crossed the room, stopped in front of her, his gaze unwavering. "Because the second my men think they can touch you, you're dead. And I don't save people just to watch them die." Ava's breath caught. "You're putting yourself at risk, for me." "I know. Why?" Luca's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, his voice raw, "Because you remind me what it feels like to give a damn." The words hit her like a confession. Ava saw it then, the full weight of what he'd done, the danger he'd invited, the loyalty he'd fractured, all for a woman who wore a badge he despised. She reached up, her hand trembling, and touched his face. Luca went still. "Thank you," she whispered. And for the first time since she'd met him, she saw past the monster the world had painted. She saw the man who'd saved her, the man who'd protected her, the man who'd chosen her over his own empire, and something inside her shifted forever. The file landed on the table with a sound that felt like a verdict. Luca stood over it, his jaw tight, his hands braced on either side of the manila folder like he was holding back something violent. Ava sat across from him, her eyes locked on the label scrawled in black marker. Reyes, Ava, Internal Investigation. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does it matter?" "Yes." Luca's eyes met hers, hard and unflinching. "A contact inside the precinct, someone who owes me more than loyalty. They owe me their life." Ava's stomach twisted. She didn't want to touch the file, didn't want to know what was inside, because once she opened it, there would be no going back. But Luca pushed it toward her anyway. "Read it," he said quietly. "You deserve to know the truth." Her hands trembled as she flipped open the cover. The first page was a surveillance photo. Her, standing outside the precinct, talking to Captain Doyle. Date stamped 3 weeks before the shooting. The second page was a wire transfer, $50,000. Sender, offshore account registered to a shell company. Recipient, Captain Raymond Doyle. The third page was a transcript, a conversation between Doyle and another officer, discussing her investigation, calling her a liability, planning the hit. Ava's breath stopped. She flipped through more pages, bank records, text messages, audio transcripts, evidence she'd been gathering for months, evidence that had disappeared the night she was shot. But it wasn't gone. Someone had saved it. Someone had compiled it. Someone inside the NYPD had documented the entire conspiracy and then buried it. Her hands shook so hard the papers rattled. "This can't be real." "It is," Luca said, his voice like iron. "Your captain didn't just try to kill you. He erased you, declared you dead, closed your case, and every cop who knew the truth, they stayed silent." Ava's vision blurred. "Why?" "Because the corruption goes deeper than Doyle. He's not the top. He's just the one who got caught." She looked up at him, tears burning her eyes. "How many?" "Half the precinct, maybe more." The room tilted. Everything she'd believed in, the badge, the oath, the promise that justice existed somewhere beneath the rot, crumbled in her hands like ash. "I trusted them," she whispered. "I trusted him." Luca moved around the table, crouched in front of her, his hands gripping hers. "I know. He was my mentor. He taught me everything. He told me I could make a difference." "And you did," Luca said fiercely. "You found the truth. That's why he tried to kill you." Ava pulled her hands free, stood abruptly, and turned away. Her chest heaved with rage and grief, and something darker, something that tasted like betrayal so deep it had become part of her DNA. "I should have seen it," she said, her voice breaking. I should have known." "You couldn't have." "Yes, I could." She whirled on him, her eyes blazing. "I'm a detective. It's my job to see the truth. And I was so blind, so stupid." "Stop." Luca stood, his voice cutting through her spiral. "You weren't stupid. You were loyal. And they used that against you." The words hit her like a punch. Because he was right. She'd been loyal to a system that had sold her out, to a captain who'd smiled at her while signing her death warrant, to a badge that meant nothing when the men wearing it were monsters. She sank back onto the chair, her head in her hands, and let the tears come. Luca didn't say anything. He just sat beside her, his presence steady and unshakable, until the storm passed. Finally, she lifted her head and looked at him. "What do I do now?" Luca's gaze was dark, determined, and dangerously certain. "We burn them all." Ava couldn't stop replaying it, the night of the shooting. Every detail now felt like a clue she'd missed. She sat on the floor of the safe house, knees drawn to her chest, her mind dissecting the memory with the precision of a blade. Captain Doyle's voice on the radio, "Reyes, I need you to check out a tip. Warehouse on South 9th, possible weapons cache, go alone, don't want to spook them." She'd questioned it. "Alone, sir? You're the best I've got. I trust you." Trust. The word felt like poison now. She'd gone. She'd followed orders like a good soldier, and when she'd reached the alley, there'd been no weapons cache, no suspects, just shadows and rain and the smell of gunpowder, and then the shot, from behind. She'd spun, her hand going for her weapon, but the pain had hit first, a white-hot explosion in her side that dropped her to the ground. Through the haze of agony, she'd heard his voice. "Doyle." "I'm sorry, Reyes, you were too damn good." Another shot, but her vision had already been fading. She'd thought she was dying, she'd thought that was the end, but Luca had found her. Luca had saved her. And now she was sitting in a mafia safe house, staring at proof that the man she'd trusted most had orchestrated her execution. "Ava." Luca's voice pulled her back. She looked up. He stood in the doorway, watching her with that same steady intensity that made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. "You okay?" She let out a bitter laugh. "No." He crossed the room, sat beside her on the floor, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "He filed a report," Ava said finally. "Declared me killed in the line of duty, gave a speech at my memorial, told my parents I died a hero." Luca's jaw tightened. "Your parents?" She nodded. "They're in Jersey, retired. They don't know I'm alive." "Do you want them to?" Ava's throat closed. "I don't know. If I tell them, Doyle will know. And if he knows, he'll come for them." She looked at him, her eyes burning. "I can't put them in danger. Then we end this before he gets the chance." "How?" Luca's gaze was cold, calculating. "We take everything he has, his money, his power, his reputation, and then we bury him so deep he'll never see daylight again." Ava's heart pounded. "You're talking about war." "I'm talking about justice." "That's not justice," she said. "That's revenge." Luca's lips curved into something dark. "Sometimes they're the same thing." And God help her, Ava was starting to believe him. The revelation changed everything. They couldn't go to the NYPD. Half the precinct was compromised. They couldn't go to the FBI. Doyle had connections there too. Old friends, favors owed, chains of corruption that ran deeper than either of them had imagined. They couldn't trust law enforcement. And Luca couldn't trust his own crew. Not completely. Marco had already questioned his judgment. Others were whispering. Bringing a cop into their world had fractured loyalties. They were alone. Two people against a city that wanted them dead. Ava paced the safe house, her mind racing. We need evidence, something that can't be ignored, something that forces the truth into the open. Luca leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "The file I gave you isn't enough?" "It's a start, but Doyle will call it fabricated. He'll say you planted it to discredit the NYPD. Then we get more." "How?" Luca's eyes darkened. We go to the source. Ava stopped pacing. You mean Doyle? I mean, we make him confess. He'll never— He will, Luca interrupted, if he thinks he's safe. If he thinks he's won. Ava stared at him. You want to use me as bait. I want to give him a choice. Confess or die knowing the truth will come out anyway. Her pulse quickened. It was insane, dangerous, the kind of plan that could get them both killed. But it was also the only play they had. If we do this, Ava said slowly, there's no going back. The NYPD will come after me. Your crew will turn on you. We'll both be targets. Luca stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. I stopped caring about going back the moment I pulled you out of that alley. Ava's breath caught. Why? She whispered. Why are you risking everything for me? Luca's hand reached up, his fingers brushing her jaw with a gentleness that contradicted everything he was. Because, he said quietly, you're the first person in 10 years who made me remember what it feels like to fight for something that matters. Ava's heart slammed against her ribs, and in that moment, she realized something terrifying. She trusted him more than she'd ever trusted anyone, more than her captain, more than her badge, more than the system she'd sworn to uphold. She trusted the man the world called a monster, and maybe, just maybe, that made her a monster too. It happened the night they almost died. They'd been moving safe houses again. Luca's paranoia had saved them more than once, when Doyle's men found them. 3 cars, 8 men, guns drawn. Luca had grabbed Ava's hand and run. They'd disappeared into the labyrinth of Brooklyn's industrial district, weaving through abandoned factories and rusted shipping containers, gunfire echoing behind them like thunder. By the time they stopped, they were both gasping for breath, hidden in the dark corner of a forgotten warehouse, pressed against the cold metal wall. Ava's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. Sweat dripped down her spine, adrenaline surged through her veins like fire. Luca's body was a shield in front of hers, his gun still drawn, his breathing ragged. Are they? Quiet, he whispered. They stood frozen, listening. Footsteps. Voices, flashlights cutting through the dark. Luca's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezed once, a silent promise. I've got you. The footsteps faded. The voices grew distant. Finally, silence. Luca exhaled slowly, lowered his gun, and turned to face her. They were inches apart, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. You okay? He asked, his voice rough. Ava nodded. But she wasn't okay, because she was standing in the dark with a man who'd killed for a living, who'd built an empire on blood and fear, who should have been her enemy, and all she wanted to do was close the distance between them. We should move, Luca said, but he didn't move. Neither did she. Luca, she whispered. His gaze dropped to her lips. And then, the world narrowed to nothing but the space between them. She didn't know who moved first. All she knew was his mouth was on hers, fierce and desperate, and full of everything they'd been holding back. His hands gripped her waist, her fingers tangled in his hair. The kiss was fire and fury and need that had been building since the moment he'd carried her out of that alley. It was wrong. It was forbidden. It was the most honest thing either of them had ever done. When they finally broke apart, gasping, Luca's forehead pressed against hers. We can't, he said, his voice hoarse. I know, Ava whispered, but neither of them pulled away, because the truth was, they'd already crossed the line, and there was no going back. They made it back to the safe house as dawn broke over the city. Neither of them spoke about the kiss. But the air between them was different now, charged with something dangerous and undeniable. Ava sat on the couch, her hands still trembling from the chase. Luca stood by the window, watching the street below, his jaw tight. Finally, he turned to her. I'm going to destroy them, he said quietly. Everyone who hurt you, Doyle, his crew, the precinct, all of it. Ava looked up at him. That's not justice. That's war. Then call it war." His eyes were dark, relentless. "But I'm not letting them get away with this." "And what happens to you?" Ava asked, her voice breaking. "You go after the NYPD. You'll have every cop in the city hunting you. Your empire will crumble. Your men will turn on you. You'll lose everything." Luca crossed the room, knelt in front of her, and took her hands in his. "I've already lost everything that mattered," he said. "The only thing I have left is you." Ava's breath caught. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Don't sacrifice yourself for me." "I'm not," Luca said fiercely. "I'm doing this because it's right, because they don't get to destroy you and walk away, because for the first time in 10 years, I have something worth fighting for." Tears burned her eyes. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "But I'd rather die fighting for you than live knowing I let them win." Ava pulled her hands free, stood abruptly, and paced the room. "You don't owe me this." "Yes," Luca said, standing. "I do." "Why?" "Because you made me human again." The words shattered something inside her. She turned, crossed the room, and kissed him. This time there was no hesitation. No guilt, just raw, desperate need. When they broke apart, her voice was steady and certain. "Then we do this together," she said. "We take them down, all of them. But we do it smart, we do it right, and we both walk out alive." Luca's lips curved into a dark, dangerous smile. "Deal." And in that moment, Detective Ava Reyes and Mafia Boss Luca Moretti became something the world had never seen. Partners in vengeance, bound by blood and promises and a love that should never have existed. The call came at midnight. Marco's voice, tight and urgent. "Boss, we've got a problem." Luca was on his feet in seconds. "Talk." "Someone leaked your location. Doyle's men are moving. You've got maybe 10 minutes. Ava heard the words and felt her blood turn to ice. "Who?" Luca demanded. Silence. Then, quietly, "Tommy. He made a deal." "Money and immunity in exchange for the cop?" Luca's expression went cold. "Where is he?" "Gone. Disappeared an hour ago." Luca ended the call and turned to Ava. "We need to move. Now." "Who's Tommy?" "One of my crew. I trusted him." His jaw tightened. "I was wrong." They grabbed what they could, weapons, cash, the ghost file, and ran. The streets were empty. The city held its breath. They made it 3 blocks before the cars appeared. Headlights, screeching tires, guns drawn. "Run!" Luca shouted. They split up. A desperate gamble. Ava darted into an alley, her wound screaming in protest. Luca went the opposite direction, drawing fire. Gunshots echoed. Ava's heart pounded. She found cover behind a dumpster, her breath coming in gasps, and pulled out the burner phone Luca had given her. One message. "Meet at the bridge." "Don't trust anyone." She ran. By the time she reached the Brooklyn Bridge, dawn was breaking. The city stretched out before her, bathed in gold and shadow. And then she saw him. Luca emerged from the darkness, blood on his shirt, his gun still in his hand. He was alive. Ava ran to him, and he caught her, his arms wrapping around her like a vow. "We're not safe," he said. "I know." "They'll keep coming." "I know." Luca pulled back, his hands framing her face. "Then we end this. Tonight." Ava met his gaze, her eyes fierce and certain. "Tonight," she agreed. And as the sun rose over Brooklyn, 2 people who should have been enemies stood together on the edge of war, ready to burn the world down. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of Tommy bleeding. He sat tied to a chair in the center of the room, his face swollen, his breathing shallow. Blood dripped from his split lip onto the concrete floor, each drop echoing like a countdown. Luca stood in front of him, his knuckles bruised, his expression carved from stone. Ava watched from the shadows, her stomach twisting. She'd seen violence before, in interrogation rooms, crime scenes, the aftermath of gang wars. But this was different. This was personal. "Why?" Luca asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. Tommy spat blood. "They offered me 50 grand. Clean slate. New identity." And you believed them? Tommy laughed bitterly. Better than dying in your war, boss. Luca's jaw tightened. I gave you a home, a family. I trusted you with my life. Yeah, well, Tommy said, his voice cracking. Trust don't pay the bills, and your little cop girlfriend? She's a death sentence for all of us. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Luca moved so fast Ava barely saw it. His hand shot out, gripping Tommy's throat, lifting him, chair and all, off the ground. Say that again, Luca said quietly. I dare you. Tommy choked, his eyes bulging. Ava stepped forward. Luca. He didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on Tommy, cold and unforgiving. She's not the death sentence, Luca said. You are. He dropped Tommy, the chair crashing to the floor. Tommy gasped for air, coughing violently. Marco appeared from the shadows, gun in hand. What do you want us to do with him? Luca straightened, wiping blood from his knuckles. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then he said, Let him go. Marco's eyes widened. Boss? Let him go, Luca repeated, his voice like iron. But make sure every crew in Brooklyn knows what he did. Make sure they know the price of betrayal. Tommy's face went pale, because being killed would have been mercy. What Luca just sentenced him to was worse. Exile, dishonor, a target on his back from every family in the city. Tommy would spend the rest of his short life running, and when they caught him, and they would, his death would be slow. Marco nodded, hauled Tommy to his feet, and dragged him out. The door slammed shut. Silence fell. Ava stepped into the light, her heart pounding. You didn't have to do that. Luca turned to her, his eyes dark and unreadable. Yes, I did. There are other ways. No, Luca interrupted, his voice raw. There aren't. This is my world, Ava. This is what it takes to survive, and if you can't stomach it, tell me now. Ava met his gaze, unflinching. She'd seen the violence, the ruthlessness, the cold calculation that kept him alive in a city that wanted him dead, but she'd also seen the man who'd saved her, protected her, chosen her over everything he'd built. I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly. Luca's expression softened, just for a moment. Even after seeing that? Especially after seeing that. Because she understood now. In his world, mercy was weakness, loyalty was currency, and love? Love was the most dangerous weapon of all. Luca crossed the room, his hand cupping her face. You deserve better than this. Maybe, Ava whispered, but I don't want better. I want you. And when he kissed her, it tasted like blood and redemption and a future neither of them was sure they'd survive to see, but they'd fight for it anyway. Together. The story broke at dawn. Every news station, every website, every feed in the city lit up with the same headline. NYPD captain linked to corruption scandal. Detective declared dead to cover crimes. Ava watched it unfold from a motel room in Queens, her laptop open, her hands trembling as the evidence she'd leaked spread like wildfire. Bank records, wire transfers, audio recordings, the ghost file Luca had given her, now in the hands of journalists who couldn't ignore it. Captain Raymond Doyle's face appeared on every screen, his photo, his badge number, his decorated history now stained with accusations too damning to dismiss. Reporters swarmed the precinct. Cameras flashed. Questions shouted. Captain Doyle? Is it true you ordered the execution of Detective Ava Reyes? Did you falsify her death report? How many officers are involved in this conspiracy? Doyle stood on the precinct steps, surrounded by lawyers, his face a mask of controlled fury. These allegations are baseless, fabricated by criminal elements seeking to discredit law enforcement. But his voice wavered. Because the evidence was real, and everyone knew it. Ava's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You just declared war. Hope you're ready to finish it. She didn't need to ask who sent it. Doyle. Luca appeared in the doorway, 2 coffees in hand. He set one beside her and watched the screen over her shoulder. It's working, he said. Ava nodded, but her chest felt tight. The city's going to explode. Let it. People will get hurt. People are already hurt, Luca said, his voice hard. The difference is, now the truth is out. Now they can't hide. On the screen, a reporter announced, "The FBI has launched an investigation into the NYPD's 7th precinct. Multiple officers have been placed on administrative leave pending review." Ava exhaled slowly. This is really happening. Yeah, Luca said, and now comes the hard part. She looked up at him. What's that? Staying alive long enough to see it through. Because Doyle wasn't going to go quietly. Men like him never did. And when cornered, they became the most dangerous predators of all. Ava closed the laptop and stood. Then we don't give him the chance to corner us. Luca's lips curved into a dark smile. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Ava said, we stop running, we stop hiding, and we make him come to us. That's suicide. No, Ava said, her eyes fierce. That's justice. And for the first time since the scandal broke, Luca saw the cop she used to be, the woman who'd sworn an oath, who'd believed in something bigger than herself, who'd been willing to die for the truth. She wasn't that naive cop anymore, but she was still a fighter. And God help anyone who stood in her way. The city turned into a battlefield overnight. Doyle's men wanted Ava dead before she could testify. Rival gangs saw Luca's distraction as an opportunity to move on his territory. The NYPD, fractured and desperate, wanted both of them in cuffs or coffins. No one was safe. Luca and Ava moved through Brooklyn like ghosts, changing locations every few hours, sleeping in shifts, always armed, always watching. They'd been on the run for 3 days when the first attempt came. A black SUV pulled up beside them at a red light, windows rolled down, guns raised. Luca saw it first. Get down! He yanked Ava below the dash as bullets shredded the car. Glass exploded, metal screamed. Luca floored the accelerator, the car lurching forward, tires screeching, more shots. The rear window shattered. Ava grabbed the gun from the glove box, twisted in her seat and returned fire. 3 shots. Clean, precise. The SUV's front tire blew. It swerved, crashed into a parked car, and stopped. Luca glanced at her. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? Police Academy, Ava said breathlessly. Top of my class. Remind me never to piss you off. Despite everything, she almost smiled. They ditched the car in Red Hook and disappeared into the maze of warehouses and shipping yards. Night had fallen by the time they found cover, an abandoned subway station, long forgotten by the city. Luca checked the perimeter while Ava caught her breath, her hands still shaking from adrenaline. How many more? She asked. More what? How many more times are we going to almost die? Luca crouched beside her, his expression grim. Until we finish this. Or it finishes us. Ava looked at him, really looked. He was exhausted, bruised, running on fumes and sheer will, but his eyes were still sharp, still determined, still protecting her. We can't keep doing this, she said quietly. I know. Then what's the plan? Luca pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages and showed her the screen. It was an address, a time, and a message from Marco. Doyle's meeting his contact tonight, warehouse on Kent Ave, alone. Ava's pulse quickened. It's a trap. Probably. Then why are we even considering it? Luca's eyes met hers. Because it's also an opportunity. We end this tonight, one way or another. Ava's stomach twisted, but she nodded, because he was right. They couldn't run forever. Eventually you had to stand and fight, even if it killed you. Chapter 22. The Last Stand. The warehouse on Kent Avenue smelled like rust and old blood. Luca and Ava moved through the darkness, weapons drawn, every shadow a potential threat. The building was massive, 3 stories of forgotten industry, broken windows, and ghosts. He's here, Luca whispered, his voice barely audible. Ava nodded. She could feel it too. That electric charge in the air that came before violence. They reached the main floor and stopped. Captain Raymond Doyle stood in the center of the room, flanked by 4 men, all armed, all ready. He smiled when he saw Ava. "Detective Reyes, I have to admit, I'm impressed. Most people don't crawl out of their graves." Ava stepped forward, her gun raised. "It's over, Doyle." "Is it?" He gestured at the men around him. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're outnumbered and outgunned." "Maybe," Ava said. "But I'm not alone." Doyle's eyes shifted to Luca. "Ah, yes, the infamous Luca Moretti. Tell me, how does it feel to throw away your empire for a cop?" Luca's expression was cold. "Better than living as a coward." Doyle's smile vanished. "Last chance. Walk away. Disappear. And maybe I'll let you live." "No," Ava said. "You're going to confess. On record, everything you did, everyone you paid, or the evidence I leaked, that's just the beginning." Doyle laughed. "You think anyone will believe you? A dead cop and a mafia boss? You're a joke." "Then why are you here?" Luca asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Because Doyle was here, which meant he was scared. Doyle's jaw tightened. "Kill them." The room erupted, gunfire, chaos. Ava dove behind a concrete pillar as bullets ricocheted around her. Luca moved like a shadow, taking down 2 men before they could react. Ava returned fire, her training kicking in. 1 shot, 2, 3. And then she saw it. Doyle, running for the exit. "Luca!" she shouted. He turned, saw Doyle fleeing, and ran. Ava followed. They caught him in the alley. Doyle spun, gun raised, and fired. The shot hit Luca in the shoulder. He stumbled, blood blooming across his shirt, but didn't fall. Ava didn't hesitate. She fired. The bullet struck Doyle's leg. He went down screaming. Luca staggered forward, his gun trained on Doyle's chest. "It's over." Doyle laughed bitterly, blood pooling beneath him. "You think this changes anything? I'm one man. The system is bigger than me. It'll keep going." "Maybe," Ava said, stepping forward. "But you won't." She pulled out her phone, hit record, and crouched beside him. "Say it," she said. "All of it, on camera." Doyle glared at her. "Go to hell." Luca pressed his gun against Doyle's temple. "Say it, or I finish this my way." Doyle's breathing quickened, and then, slowly, he started talking. Names, dates, payments, crimes, everything. When he finished, Ava stopped recording and stood. "You're done," she said. Sirens wailed in the distance. Luca swayed, his hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. Ava caught him, her arm wrapping around his waist. "We need to go," she said. "Not yet." Luca looked down at Doyle. "You took everything from her, her badge, her life, her faith in the system she swore to protect. Luca." "But she's still standing," Luca continued, "and you're bleeding out in an alley. So tell me, Captain." "Who won?" Doyle said nothing. The sirens grew louder. Luca and Ava disappeared into the night. Together, alive, victorious. Chapter 23. The Confession. They made it to a safe house in Staten Island, one of Luca's final fallback locations, unknown even to most of his crew. Ava stitched Luca's shoulder by the light of a single lamp, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her. "You should see a doctor," she said. "Can't risk it. You could die. I've survived worse." Ava tied off the final stitch and met his eyes. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Act like your life doesn't matter." Luca's expression softened. "It matters. Because of you." Ava's breath caught. He reached up, his hand cupping her face. "I need to tell you something." "Luca." "Listen," he said, his voice raw. "I've done terrible things. I've hurt people. Killed people, built an empire on blood and fear, and for years I told myself it didn't matter, that I was beyond redemption." Tears burned Ava's eyes. "But then I found you," Luca continued, "bleeding in an alley, and for the first time in 10 years I felt something other than guilt and rage. I felt hope." "Luca," she whispered. "I love you, Ava," he said. "I know I don't deserve to. I know you should walk away and never look back. But I love you, and I need you to know that before—" She kissed him, Hard, desperate, full of every emotion she'd been holding back. When they broke apart, she was crying. "You saved my life," she said. "You protected me when no one else would. You fought for me. You chose me. So don't you dare talk about not deserving love. I'm a criminal, and I'm a cop who just helped you torture a confession out of my captain. We're both monsters now." Luca smiled, a real smile, rare and beautiful. "Then I guess we deserve each other." Ava laughed through her tears. "I guess we do." She kissed him again, softer this time, and whispered against his lips, "I love you too." And in that moment, in a forgotten safe house on the edge of the city, two broken people became whole, not because they were perfect, but because they were together. Chapter 24: The Fall of the Captain. The press conference was broadcast live across every network. FBI agents stood on the steps of the NYPD headquarters, flanked by reporters, cameras, and a city holding its breath. The lead agent stepped forward, his expression grim. "After a thorough investigation," he began, "we have concluded that Captain Raymond Doyle, along with 14 other officers from the 7th Precinct, engaged in a coordinated effort to obstruct justice, accept bribes, and falsify official reports." The crowd erupted. "Captain Doyle has been arrested and charged with attempted murder, corruption, racketeering, and conspiracy. Additional arrests are expected in the coming weeks." Ava watched from the safe house, her heart pounding. On screen, a reporter shouted, "What about Detective Ava Reyes? Is it true she was declared dead to cover up the conspiracy?" The FBI agent nodded. "Detective Reyes is alive. Her death was falsified by Captain Doyle to prevent her from exposing his crimes. She is currently under protective custody and will be testifying in the coming trial." Another reporter, "And Luca Moretti, sources say he was involved in rescuing Detective Reyes. Is he being charged?" The agent hesitated. "Mr. Moretti's involvement is complicated. The investigation is ongoing." Ava muted the TV. Luca sat beside her, his shoulder bandaged, his expression unreadable. "They're going to come for you," Ava said quietly. "I know. I can testify. Tell them you saved me, that you're not the monster they think you are." Luca took her hand. "And what happens when they ask about everything else I've done?" Ava's throat tightened. Because he was right. Saving her didn't erase the years of crime, the violence, the empire built on illegal enterprise. "I don't know," she admitted. "Then let me make this easy," Luca said. "I'm not running, not anymore. Whatever happens next, I'll face it. You'll go to prison. Maybe, but Doyle's going down. Your name is cleared, and you get your life back. That's enough." "It's not enough," Ava said fiercely. "You deserve more than that." Luca smiled sadly. "I deserve what I get. But you deserve everything." And Ava realized with crushing clarity that he was ready to sacrifice himself, for her, for justice, for a future where she could live without looking over her shoulder. "No," she said. "We're not doing this. We're not separating. We find another way." "Ava." "I said no." Her voice was steel, and for the first time since they'd met, Luca saw the woman she'd been before the world broke her, the detective who never gave up, the fighter who refused to lose, the woman he'd fallen in love with. "Okay," he said quietly, "we find another way." And as the city burned with scandal and the NYPD crumbled beneath the weight of its corruption, two people who should never have been together made a choice. They'd face whatever came next. Together. Chapter 25: What Shocked the Whole NYPD. The footage surfaced 3 days later. Security camera video from the alley where Ava had been shot. Grainy, time-stamped, irrefutable. It showed everything. Ava, bleeding, Doyle standing over her, gun raised, the shot, her body hitting the ground, and then Luca, emerging from the shadows, checking her pulse, tearing off his jacket to stop the bleeding, carrying her to his car, saving her life. The video went viral in hours. News anchors debated, social media exploded, the city couldn't look away. Because the man they'd called a monster had done something no cop had. He'd saved one of their own. The NYPD released a statement. In light of new evidence, the department acknowledges that Mr. Luca Moretti acted to preserve the life of Detective Eva Reyes. While his criminal history remains under investigation, his actions on the night in question demonstrate a complexity that warrants further review. It wasn't an exoneration, but it was something. Eva watched the footage from the window of the safe house, tears streaming down her face. Luca stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "The whole city's watching," she whispered. "Let them. They're calling you a hero." Luca's laugh was bitter. "I'm not a hero." "No," Eva said, turning to face him. "You're not. You're a criminal, a killer. A man who's done terrible things." Luca's expression hardened. "Then why?" "Because you're also the man who saved my life when no one else would. The man who fought for me, protected me, loved me." She took his hand, her eyes fierce. "The city can call you whatever they want, but I know the truth." "And what's that?" "You're my miracle." Luca's breath caught. Outside, the city continued its debate. The NYPD scrambled to rebuild its reputation. Doyle awaited trial. And somewhere in Brooklyn, a war between gangs and corrupt cops slowly faded into memory. But inside that safe house, two people who'd been broken by the world found something neither thought possible: redemption, not in the eyes of the law, not in the judgment of society, but in each other. 3 months later, Eva stood on the steps of the federal courthouse. Her badge returned, her name cleared, her testimony complete. Reporters swarmed. "Detective Reyes, what's next for you?" She smiled. "I'm going back to work, doing what I do best." "And Luca Moretti? Are you still in contact?" Ava's expression softened. "Mr. Moretti cooperated fully with the investigation. His testimony helped bring down one of the largest corruption rings in NYPD history." "Is he free?" "He's working with authorities on an ongoing basis." Which was the truth, because Luca had made a deal, his knowledge of organized crime in exchange for immunity on certain charges. He'd never be fully clean, but he wouldn't spend his life in prison either. It was complicated, messy, morally gray, but it was survival. And as Eva walked down those courthouse steps, she saw him, leaning against a car, cigarette in hand, that same dark intensity in his eyes. She crossed the street, stopped in front of him and said, "You came. Told you I would. They're still watching you." "I know." "We can't." "I know," Luca said, his voice soft. "But I can still make sure you get home safe." Eva smiled. "And then what?" "Then we figure it out, one day at a time." She stepped closer, her hand finding his. "Together?" "Together." And as they walked into the Brooklyn sunset, a detective and a mafia boss, bound by love and scandal, and a truth the world would never fully understand, Eva thought about the headline that had started it all. "Mafia Boss found dying female cop in the alley. What happened next?" Shocked the whole of NYPD. They'd called it shocking. They'd called him a monster. They'd called it impossible. But Eva knew better, because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world wasn't a bullet or a badge, it was love, and they'd survived it. Together. If you made it to the end of this story, if your heart is still racing, if you're sitting there wondering what happens next, then I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button, because this story, it doesn't exist without you. Drop a comment. Tell me, did Eva and Luca get the ending they deserved? Would you risk everything for love like they did? And if you want more stories like this, dark, dangerous, emotional, and unforgettable, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because I'm just getting started. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for believing in a love story that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. This is the end of their story. But maybe, just maybe, it's the beginning of yours. See you in the next one. End.